Yo, what is up, real community? Today we're going to talk about something called integral theory, and it's something I learned about in this little book called The Music Producer's Survival Guide. I'm going to just read some stuff from it to give you guys an idea of what we're talking about here, because this guy does a way better job of distilling all this information than I can do. But basically, I'm going to start with this. This is from the book. We live in a complex world that places an unprecedented combination of demands on us. And Harvard psychologist Robert Kegan sums it up and says that these demands may require a qualitative transformation in the complexity of mind, every bit as fundamental as the transformation from magical thinking to concrete thinking, or the transformation from concrete thinking to abstract thinking. So basically, and then I'm gonna so the guy that integral theory is primarily associated with Wilber, and he said that integral theory is an all-inclusive framework that draws on the key insights of the world's greatest knowledge traditions. The awareness gained from drawing on all truths and perspectives allows the integral thinker to bring new depth, clarity, and compassion to every level of human endeavor, from unlocking individual potential to finding new approaches to global scale problems. So hopefully you guys can get an idea of why this might apply to your journey here. And so, I mean, this is basically, you know, how do we learn and how do we approach learning? So, so basically, integral theory mostly supports the architecture, I guess, of what we learn and how we learn it. And so I'm gonna kind of give you guys stuff that's right from the appendix of this book about integral theory. It's the Integral Theory Primer. And there are 5 fundamental aspects. There are quadrants of knowing and being. There are levels of development. There are lines of development, states of consciousness, and personality types. And I invite you guys to go and like write this shit down or something. I don't even know if you can see this, but I'm just reading from it. And if once I get better, I might like do whiteboards and stuff for you guys or something like that. But for now, you're just gonna have to take a lecture and write notes. It's probably more effective for you anyway than seeing what I've written. Like, you guys should write this shit down if it's really like something that's new to you. So, but basically those 5 fundamental aspects generate and support a universe that is composed of holons, H-O-L-O-N-S, or whole parts. A holon is Arthur Koestler's term for capturing the fact that everything we see and all that we are is composed of wholes, W-H-O-L-E-S, that are themselves parts of larger wholes. Consider your organs, which are whole parts, but they're also part of your body, which is a whole part. So, so basically, you know, that's basically what holons are. And I don't think that there's much for me, you know, to go over in here. Koestler coined the term holon and holarchy, and although we do see things as a hierarchy of power or control, what most people think of as structural hierarchy is better considered as a holarchy, a nested system of holons, or holes. And basically, Koestler tells us that each member in a holarchy is a sub-hole, or holon in its own right, a stable, integrated structure, equipped with self-regulatory devices, and enjoying a considerable degree of autonomy or self-government. Holons are Janus-faced, J-A-N-U-S, meaning the face turned upward toward the higher levels is that of a dependent part. The face turned downward towards its own constituents is that of a whole of remarkable self-sufficiency. So, you know, the example is your brain is a stable integrated structure dependent on your body, but self-sufficient from each individual brain cell. And again, you know, I don't need to go too much into this because there's a lot to cover. We're already almost at 5 minutes. So I'm gonna show you here, this is the all quadrants integrated map. And maybe you guys can like freeze frame this or something and zoom in. I don't want to show too much of this book because of copyright, but this is actually something from a website that's totally cool to take. So that's fine. So maybe you guys can look at this and reference it with what the rest of what I'm about to say goes into. So basically here, So again, so he says, what is a holon? And he says, if you can give something a name, it's a holon. And although they are whole parts in any given context, we can choose to define something as the whole or the part. Take your intestine, you know, that's a whole, but then there's actually parts of it underneath it that make it that, and that's, so the intestine has parts below it, and it is the top of that whole structure, but then within the body, it's a lower part, and it makes up the whole structure of the body. So you guys get this. I mean, you guys are pretty smart, I would imagine. So let's see. So I might need to actually do some editing on this video because, so basically, you know, fuck, I probably will have to edit this. Let's see. Okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it with this. All right, well, I'm gonna skip ahead. So basically, we have the holons, which are the whole parts, and then there are quadrants. And the quadrants represent the 4 basic dimensions of each holon. So the quadrants are like the parts that make up the whole, even though the whole is, you know, it gets, maybe I'm gonna cut this out too. All right. So there is an aspect of this called quadrants, and that's what that graph that I just had up there shows. And so you guys can kind of do some research about that. It basically breaks it down more granularly as far as how the holons are constructed. So I'm going to skip past that because it's not necessarily beneficial to our conversation here. And so what I do want to touch on is the next element, which is we have the quadrants of knowing and being, and those are basically the granular parts of the holon. And then we have the levels of development, stages of development. So this facet, all right, so here, I'm gonna read this excerpt about the levels of development. So this facet of integral theory is a distillation of the most researched and accepted knowledge from a number of fields, although primarily Western psychology, sociology, anthropology, and Asian wisdom traditions. Essentially, we are talking about the evolution of consciousness, which applies to individuals and groups. And he tries to boil it down to basically the developmental model of consciousness, a model of psychological growth based on empirically measurable and qualitative differences in one's capacity to simultaneously hold perspectives. The data from these empirical studies corresponds to the progression of a demonstrably discrete sequence of developmental levels, stages, and or structures of consciousness, whether individual or collective. So the reason I'm touching on that is because there's a few crucial points when it comes to the stages of development and how it is associated with the evolution of consciousness, because you're going to need to have an understanding of this if you want to be good at, you know, basically being social, and, you know, having like social intelligence, you know. So on your stages of development, or at least your progression, stages cannot be skipped. Stages are not about motivations, styles, or types, and most importantly, although higher stages are desirable and tend to correlate with what most cultures consider being a good person, there are also pathologies that correspond to each level. Oh shit. I'm gonna skip over to lines of development because this kind of ties in with where you guys are at. So your style of learning includes multiple overlapping lines of development. And these represent different capacities and aptitudes that develop through stages in each of the quadrants. You can apply this to your own self, right? It's like, you know, you have different capacities and aptitudes. But basically, I mean, you know, you guys are gonna have different learning styles. And so, you know, understanding integral theory and understanding that you have to break everything down to its whole part, and understanding that everyone's gonna understand things differently. You know, this is just kind of all priming you guys to really understand that there's a lot to take in here. It's like, when you guys get started on this journey, it's not just a linear thing, you know. There's not just one thing that makes, you know, there's no silver bullet to whatever the thing is that you guys are trying to get better at. So, all right, and then this goes now into the next element, which is states of consciousness. And I don't want to get too wrapped up in this, but basically this guy talks about having extraordinary experiences, and he says, when a lot of people first look at a map of the levels of development, they mistakenly assign spiritual to the higher levels and think, hey, are you saying you have to be at a high stage to have a spiritual experience? The answer is, of course not. Whether you use the term spiritual, peak, religious, or otherwise, let's call them extraordinary for now. Based on thousands of years of meditative, contemplative, and psychological knowledge, there is more or less universal consensus that we all experience three basic states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, and deep dreamless sleep. In the Eastern traditions, these are commonly referred to as gross, subtle, and casual. With enough practice meditating, you can experience all of these while awake and aware. So there are at least 3 different flavors of extraordinary experiences. So if you refer back to the map that I posted, that I had on the screen for a minute, you see 9 developmental stages. An extraordinary experience can happen at any stage and is interpreted according to the structure of that stage. That means there are at least 27 different kinds of extraordinary experiences according to the Wilbur-Combs matrix. And so, you know, the reason I'm bringing that up is because I think that the extraordinary experiences are the ones that you have where you have like an aha moment, and you have a realization, you know. And then, you know, so those are going to be the times where you feel like you're actually making progress. You guys are going to have a lot of moments where you're feeling like you're having very mundane experiences and that nothing is working, and then you may have an extraordinary experience where all of a sudden so many things just suddenly make sense to you. Very, very, very uncommon, and yet very common in a way. So that being said, you know, I think that I'm gonna do my best to kind of splice this all up. I'm not really gonna do much cutting. I'm just gonna cut out the moments of me being like, where the fuck am I? But yeah, guys, go do some, you know, if this was enough for you, great. You know, you don't have to get it too much. It's like, basically the gist of this is all some very big brain shit that is saying, hey, like, doing something, like I said, you know, anything that you do, it may be simple, but it's not easy. And just because it's simple doesn't mean it's not complex. I mean, you know, the digestive system is on the surface pretty simple. You know, you eat some food, it goes into your stomach, the acid breaks it down, and then it goes into your intestines and, you know, digests further, and, you know, you use that for energy, right? Like, as a basic, like, example, it's like, all right, I get that. But then when you really, like, sit and you granular, fuck that word, when it becomes more granular, you know, it's like, you're like, oh, you have to bite the food, and then you chew the food, and then your saliva has enzymes that break it down, and then your esophagus has muscles that, you know, push it from your mouth down into your stomach, and then the stomach releases all these chemicals that do this, and then the lining does that, and then it goes down into this part and that part, and, you know, this, that, and the other. So the same is true for any endeavor, any understanding of any system, whether it be, you know, cultural, social, technical, whatever it is. It's gonna be made up of many parts, and if you want to become a master at that, or at least very good at it, you know, you have to have a thorough understanding of, like, how all that stuff works. and how that applies to you in the real world. So anyway, guys, yeah, I guess, you know, that's my best shot at, for now, distilling what integral theory is. Maybe I'll read through this a few more times, like, because it's been a while. I read through it again before I did this, but you know, maybe I'll do another video on this later, but it's probably kind of pointless, because it's like, at the end of the day, the point is to not get so hung up on the theory, not get so hung up on, you know, like the big picture, and actually just get hung up on what's right in front of you, and like focus on those details. Because the better you understand those details, and less you have to think about those small things, because it's just a part of your understanding, then the bigger sorts of like achievements you'll start seeing yourself accomplish without having as much like brain power put into it, you know? So yeah, guys, that's one of the things that I can say, and I'll leave it with this. That's one of the reasons that I've gotten to the point that I have, and progressed to where I have, is because, you know, I'm the kind of guy where I'll take something and I'm like, all right, you know, this is a thing, this is a topic, this is a concept, and then I'm like, okay, well, you know, let me get a full understanding of like all the moving parts, and then I'm gonna burrow into each one of those kind of, and like get a full understanding of it. But I'm also not gonna get too hung up on like that stuff to where it serves as like a block, you know, and stops me from progressing in all the other aspects, because, you know, everything is a balance. So even though there's lots of parts and you want to, you know, burrow into each one, you don't want to get stuck. You know, it's just like when you have an algebra test or a calculus test, and it's like, okay, like go through and do all the problems, solve all the problems that you know first, and then if there's ones that are tripping you up, you know, save those for the end, and, you know, make sure you can get all the easy points first, then go back and do the stuff that's really difficult. And probably by doing so, you'll have a better shot at figuring those out, because the easier ones are probably all the fundamentals and things that you need. It gives you the tools to be able to solve that more complex problem. So, all right, guys, with that, this is way too long, and I hope this brought you some entertainment at the very least. So, all right, real community, see you later.